EV 비즈니스 포럼입니다.
Okay, I'm gonna officially announce to
네,
this
그럼
session will be started.
공식적으로 포럼 세션의
Thank you so
시작을
much
알리겠습니다.
for
여러분
attending,
안녕하십니까? 참가해 주셔서 감사합니다.
The second Korea EU
두
EV
번째 한
business
EU
forum.
비즈니스
Thanks so much
EV
for
비즈니스
all of you
포럼입니다.
to attend here.
와주셔서
on site,
감사합니다.
as well as, thank you so much
또
for
실제로
the,
참석해 주신 분과
participant in virtually by Zoom,
온라인으로
this
참가해
meeting.
주신 모든
This session
여러분
will be,
감사합니다.
the open for the hybrid type.
네, 하이브리드
Everybody wants to
미팅이고요.
get into this session.
누구나
and you can
참여하실
click
수
on,
있습니다.
the Zoom URL.
줌 URL을
based
클릭해
on the
주시면
agenda
되고요.
that's appeared. Okay. So my name is Young
네, 제
Jun Moon.
소개
Last name is
드리겠습니다.
Moon.
저는 문영준입니다.
I'm the faculty member on KAIST.
카이스트의
As the,
멤버이기도
just
하고요.
right after my retirement in Korea Transport Institute last year.
제가
I
작년에
started my
은퇴를
new
한
faculty job in KAIST.
이후에
And
카이스트에
also
들어오게
I'm
되었고요.
the elected as a new the ISO technical management board member from this year.
ISO의 이사가
Then,
올해
I'm
되었습니다.
trying to do some more thing together in the ISO. in a top level,
ISO에서 제가
as well as
많은
with
기여를
collaboration
하고자 하고 있고요.
IAC, the Gabriel is
또
sitting behind, but
IEC하고도 협력을 하고자
so
합니다.
that's why my TMB role representing Korea and CATS.
네, 그래서 제
I'm
TMB
doing,
역할이
the
캐츠랑
something
대한민국을
actually to
대표하는
making,
역할이고요.
the new
따라서
paradigm of
활동적으로
international standard, which is
국제 표준의
digitalization, as well as
패러다임을
the climate
개발하기
change,
위해
the
노력하고
actions we
있습니다.
need in this era. Okay.
예를 들어서
So,
이제 저희가
as well as
기후 변화에
I'm
대해서
also
어떤
in
행동을
the,
취해야
for more
하는가도
than,
포함이
16
되고요.
years of ISO TC204, which is Intelligent Transport Systems, as a work group 17 convener, which is numeric and mobile devices. Okay. I'm very honored
그리고
to
제가
be here as
TSO
the,
TC20 컨버터로도 활동을
moderator
하고
of this
있고요.
session.
제가 오늘 MC를
Then,
맡게
if
되어서
you want to
영광입니다.
ask something, just
질문이
right after
있으시면
this session, we can make
세션이
some
끝나고
more
나서
detailed discussions together.
저희가 세부적으로 대화를
typically
나눠볼 수
lunchtime.
있을 것 같습니다. 점심시간을 활용해도 되겠고요.
The second Korea EU
네, 한 EU
EV
EV 비즈니스 포럼이 열렸는데요.
the hosted by Global Electric Vehicle Association Network, which is GEAN,
주최는 세계 전기차
and
협의회
organized by
또는 진이라고 하고요.
International Electric Vehicle Expo Organizing Committee,
또
and sponsored by Ministry
전기차
of Foreign
엑스포
Affairs in
공동
Korea,
조직
as well as EU
위원회에서
delegation to
주최를
Korea.
하고 있습니다. 또 많은 후원사들도 있고요.
So this session will be some moving the first the part
본
of the
세션은
presentation. The second
첫
part will
번째
be
발표
the panel
세션이 있고요.
discussions.
그다음 패널 토론이
And
이어지겠습니다.
the first part, our
첫 번째는
presentation. Before moving on that, the opening ceremony
바로
will be
개막식입니다.
started.
개회사부터
I'm going to host,
시작될 것인데요.
Mr. Moon,
제일 먼저 문
co-chairman of
국현
International
전기차 엑스포
Vehicle Expo Organizing
공동
Committee.
조직
Please
위원장님을 소개해드리겠습니다. 개회사 부탁드리겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Good morning, everybody.
네, 여러분 안녕하십니까?
It is a great honor for me to speak in here.
여러분들 앞에서 연설을
on
하게
behalf of
되어서
Chairman
영광입니다.
of IB. Chairman Kim
저는
of IB
공동
is so
조직
busy
위원회를
to host
대표해서
over
왔고요.
200 different sessions
예, 다양한
for the
세션을
remaining 3 days.
주최하느라고
So,
3일간 저희가 정말
I
바빴습니다.
came here to just say hello to you
저희들
and share
여러분께
some of
인사
my
말씀드리게
thoughts.
왔고요.
Would you allow
제
me to
생각을
speak in
공유하고자
Korean?
합니다.
Would you
한국어로
try
해도
to use
괜찮겠습니까?
your headset?
혹시
Then I will speak in Korean.
리시버 사용해서
comfortably.
통역으로 들어주시면 감사하겠습니다.
바로 옆방에서 회의를 주재하다가
In
왔습니다.
the next room, I was hosting the other
옆방에서는
session. I
실리콘밸리
just came here.
쪽과 한국의 벤처.
The next room session was about Silicon Valley investment. That started from yesterday, and it's lasting to today. there was a meeting about accelerators and venture capitals in Korea and the US. And tomorrow will be followed by professors from US and startups and university students.
수련해 나가는 것을
So
볼
they
수
are going to
있습니다.
have very
저는
tight
똑같은
discussion
일이
tomorrow.
앞으로 유럽과
And the
한국
same
사이에
thing will take
일어나기를
place
희망합니다.
in Europe and Korea.
10년
That's my
전에
hope. About 10 years
IB라는
ago,
것을 저희가 카본 프리 제조 아일랜드라는 캠페인을 1년 한
we
후에
started
그때
campaign of carbon
IB를
free,
제일 많이
area.
도와주셨던 리전이
and I got a big help
유럽이었습니다.
from Europe.
지구 전체에 직면하고 있는 기후 위기를 어떻게 공동 대처할까
We
하는
talked about
측면에서
how to solve
유럽이
climate challenge
이
globally.
IB를 제일 많이
And that time,
도와주셨습니다.
Europe helped
작년만 해도
IBIE
사실 이
the
자리에는
most. Last year,
EU에서 오신 한국에 오신 EU 대사님들이
There are
10분
a lot of
이상
more than
참여하셨고
10 ambassadors
마침
from the
우크라이나 전쟁이
from the EU.
일어났을 때라
And
많은
that time, the Ukraine war
박수를
occurred.
받고 많은 지지를 주한 유럽 대사들이
So many
받았습니다.
ambassadors from
아마
European
오늘은
countries gained a lot of
한미
support.
정상회의 때문에 윤 대통령이 오신 첫날이고 또 우크라이나에서는 대격전을
And
앞둔
the
때라
president just came
작년에
here
오셨던 많은
today.
분들을 다 오시지 못했고
And unfortunately, we were not able to invite many ambassadors, but there are other ambassadors, including Croatia and Denmark. And I'd like to say my big welcome to them. And I'm always with the EU. I'm with democracy and human rights. And I support liberty and justice.
특히 일렉트릭 비클가 10년 같이 왔는데 이제 전 세계에 이것이 노음이 되거나
And it's been 10 years since we started, and EU will become a norm beyond the mega trend. And we are preparing for the next 10 years. And we are thinking about our direction, how we realize green mobility and e-mobility.
이 분야에서 10년 전부터
And the expert, Mr. Lam, actually, he first introduced electric vehicles to Korea. Please give me a big hand.
이렇게 시대를 앞서가는 발명가의
He's a inventor and pioneer and business leader, and
영국 지금은 어디 유럽에 계실 것 같은데
I think he's somewhere around the EU, and he's working hard to gather all the people together and their forces.
우리가 지난 10년을 이제 뒤로 하면서 앞으로 10년
And we are
세계에서 해야 될
preparing for the next 10 years for e-mobility, and we are thinking about what we can do for the world in through the discussion from a lot of experts and leaders in terms of economy and politics and others. I'd like to ask for your good leadership, and thank you very much again for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our co-chairman, Mr. Moon. Was is a remarkable remark, okay, opening remark. Thank you so much. And then it's my honor to host the ambassador of international relationship in Jeju, Mr. Ko Yunju, okay, for the welcoming remark. Please.
Thank you for kind introduction. As introduced, I'm Yoon Joo-go. I'm working as an international relations ambassador for Jeju local government. So what a great day today. When I coming down to Jeju, the weather is perfect. So you have really good timing for the forum. So on behalf of the Jeju local government, first of all, I congratulate on the electric vehicle business forum between Korea and the European Union industries. As you know, I think taking this opportunity, let me share with you my thought, why I am welcoming you to Jeju. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to give us some welcoming remarks. I'll be as brief as possible because this is a prelude to most important main event. So I thought about three things why I'm welcoming you to Jeju. First, it is about Jeju. Jeju local government would like to learn from your industry. As you might know, Jeju set its vision with the carbon-free island by the year of 2030. So it's almost 7 years away. So Jeju has been actively promoting electric vehicle transportation so that we achieve the highest electric vehicle usage ratio in Korea. So with that, we'd like to learn from your industry because electric vehicles, among others, is the main tool to achieve such a goal of the carbon-free island. So this is the first reason I'm welcoming you to Jeju. And the second is about the business opportunity for electric vehicle industries. As you know, Jeju has hosted this electric vehicle expo over the last 10 years and also played a pivotal role in creating business networks among electric vehicle industries. So that I believe this forum will provide all the participants with new business opportunities. So I'd like to ask you to take advantage of this platform. That is the second reason. And third reason, lastly, it is about Korea's favorable business environment for electric vehicle industries. Jeju is part of Korea. Korea, as you know, Korea's electric vehicle technology and industry and also electric battery industry are so strong. So that I think it will be a great opportunity for electric vehicle industries of European Union to work together with Korean partners. So I strongly believe that this forum will provide good opportunities for building partnership with the Korean electric vehicle industries. So with that said, I can confidently say you made the right choice to come to Jeju. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ko.
네, 고윤주 대사님 감사합니다. 저도 동의합니다. 말씀하셨다시피 제주는 잠재력이 뛰어난 EV 지속 가능성 섬입니다. 네, 제가 그럼 다음 연사님의 축사를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 다미르 쿠젠 주한 크로아티아 대사님이십니다. 네, 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Very good morning. I think that we all really enjoy the privilege of hospitality at this wonderful paradise island. I wish you all the best for 2030, and I'm confident that Jeju Island will be one of the models in the world, what world should look like. Ambassador Ko, Mr. So, Mr. Lam, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege to congratulate you for this 10th International Electric Vehicle Expo here at this beautiful Jeju Island. This is a topic of utmost importance and show our full commitment to the renewable energy with zero emission and better, safer and cleaner world. Both the European Union and Korea are strongly oriented towards the environment-friendly industries, and I'm confident that this Korea-EU Electric Vehicle Forum will be a significant step further in our joint cooperation, but also an additional source of inspiration in innovation-driven changes and exchanges of views, experience, and knowledge. Following the European Green Deal and its energy transition strategy, the European Union has announced that the production of petrol and diesel cars beyond the carbon-neutral fuels with the EU market will be banned after 2035. And this was recently confirmed by the European Parliament, actually in March this year. According to the International Energy Agency, more than 10 million electric vehicles are sold worldwide last year, what is almost 60% increase in just a year. Last World Economic Forum emphasized that 1 in 7 cars sold globally last year was electric, and only 5 years ago it was 1 in 70. And this is really amazing trend recognized by all people here. Last year, 20% of all new registered passenger vehicles in the European Union were battery or hybrid electric. To the European Green Deal and all relevant legislations, directives, and support, we would like to show our global social responsibility and meet the target of being climate neutral by 2050. And this is the target where the European Union and Korea and many other countries could and should work closely together. Croatia is a very active member of the European Union in implementing the energy transition strategy. As a country where the famous inventor Nikola Tesla was born, and today, guided by Rimac Automobili, Croatia is profiling as one of the leading countries in the hyper-electric cars and robotaxi development. And this is our own contribution to the global green agenda. As a country of numerous UN-protected national parks and with more than 1,700 kilometers of the Adriatic coastline, Croatia is strongly oriented towards the protection of nature and keeping the environment clean and unpolluted. And a switch to the electric vehicles, either at the roads, sea, or the air, is surely the best way. Once more, allow me to congratulate to all of you who have organized and contributed to this timely and significant 10th International EV Expo, and I wish you a successful, informative, and innovation-driven Korea-EU Electric Vehicle Forum. Thank you very much indeed. 고맙습니다.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, we have to do some more the actions we need in climate change is typically in European Union and Korea both together. Thank you so much for your remark. And another congratulatory remark will be given by my honor to introduce Mr. Seo Young-hoon as Korea Foreign Company Association Chairman.
Hello, good morning. I'm Seo Young-hoon, Chairman of Foreign Company Association. On top of my this chairman, and I'm also coincidentally working for a European company. The name is Solvay, based in Belgium. We are delivering a solution for mobility and then electronics, and then green hydrogen as well. Please excuse me to speak in Korean, and then you can use your translation tool.
I want to extend my gratitude to all participants here today. Thank you very much again. And especially, I want to congratulate the 10th anniversary of IEVE and your support to counter Korean climate change. President Kim Dae-hwan again, and all the IEVE members. When it comes to climate change of the Earth, and when it comes to sustainable economic growth, EU has shown its green leadership to counter all these issues, which led to countering change and all things we did together. So Korea as well, when it comes to Green New Deal, we did our best to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So the IEVE Expo supports this green transition in e-mobility. Especially this year, we have UAM, electric ships, and agricultural machineries as well. This is also in line with carbon-free island of Jeju 2030 and carbonless Earth of 2050. I believe this year's IEVE, there will be more collaboration of Korea and EU that will lead to the new mobility of the future. Korea-EU EV Business Forum will be a venue of talk between the two entities as well. And more than that, what we do here at the Korea Federation of Foreign Enterprises. We speak for 160 foreign companies in Korea, and we supported and will support fully this year's IEVE. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we are moving on to the presentations leading by the special speech. The title, Personally Determined Contribution to Support the Paris Climate Agreement, presented by Mr. Jung Rae-kwon. Oh, we have a photo time? Okay. I'm sorry, you know, we can have the photo time before the moving on. Okay. So please, be on the standing on the podium. Okay. Yep. Together. The photo together. Okay, let's move on the special speech leading by Mr. Jung Rae-kwon, Board Director of Ban Ki-moon Foundation, Climate Change Ambassador. Is ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, so microphone is yours, and you have 20 minutes, please.
EU forum. I came to EU, and now I am sitting in Budapest in a hotel room, and it's a very, very good morning that because it's 3 a.m. here, and a big time difference. Okay, I was first climate change ambassador of Korea, and I have been involved in negotiating and promoting UN climate regime since '91. And I'd like to show you briefly about what was missing and how can we improve our climate regime for the NDC of a Paris Climate Agreement. Okay, I will show you the PPT slides. Recently, many governments are making NDC commitments and pledges. And when I am watching, monitoring this kind of pledges from the countries around the world, it reminds me of the past experience. We made such a similar commitment in 1992 at the UNFCCC. At the time, we had legally ratified commitment by the 1992 convention that developed country will stabilize the emission by 2020 at the level of 1990 level. But most of the country didn't meet the target. And in 1997, we had the Kyoto Protocol, and the developed country committed to reduce by 2012. But once again, we have been making promises and failed. And also 2009, when I was attended the Copenhagen Accord as a climate change ambassador of Korea, this Copenhagen Accord once again had a very high expectations, but once again, we failed to deliver the results by 2020. Very interesting fact is that when we promised to reduce very ambitious target, 30 to 40% depending on the countries by 2020, but when we reached the 2020, actually nobody even remembered what kind of pledges we made in 2009. And so we have been from a climate negotiator since 1991. The Paris Climate Agreement actually is a voluntary pledge and review mechanism. And to me, I think we have wasted many times simply to end up with a non-legally binding voluntary regime. Because if we were to end up with a voluntary regime, we could have agreed in 1995 at the first COP in Berlin. But we fought about 20 years, but we end up with just a non-binding voluntary regime. And we are now looking at our NDC, National Determined Contribution of Paris Climate Agreement, as the only hope for our net zero vision. The question is, can we, or we can fulfill the goal of net zero depend by the NDC? This, I think, it will be a very big question for everybody, for the whole world community. At this stage, I'd like to share with you that what went wrong, why we could not comply with the targets we have been pledging. To me, I think we have been taking a very sectoral approach, focusing on energy transition and technological innovation. So whole issue of mitigation became an issue of money and technology. Then the big question is, how about developing countries lacking money and technology? So is net zero only an issue of money and technology? This is something we have to think about. Second issue that I think something was very much not successful was that we were focusing on only government and business as a entity. They should share the responsibility. One of the most important player missing was the consumers. And the current climate regime, consumers are left out as outsider or bystander. All of us sitting in the room, or me, we are looking at the government and the business to solve the problem. And we are just sitting here as a bystander and as an outsider. In fact, we don't know how we can share our responsibility with the government and the business. This is another very important missing piece that we should improve. Another problem that for the current climate regime is that we are focusing on CO2 emission based on production and GDP. One of the very serious problem of focusing only on GDP-based CO2 emission is that Korea is exporting car, ships, steels, but the emission that has been produced by the cars Korea is making is responsibility of Korea, not the responsibility of the drivers in Europe or in the United States. This is a very interesting situation. Who should be responsible for the car driven in Europe or in the United States? At the moment, for the Korean-made car in the United States, the responsibility lies with Korean government or Korea. Since we are focusing on carbon emission based on production, what is the most important dilemma is that it is triggering the carbon leakage. It is a very inconvenient truth. European Union, based on the data, based on the production, the CO2 emission from European Union reduced a lot. But much of the CO2 reduction of European Union is not climate action. It is a carbon leakage because of the relocation of heavy industry to China and Korea. So if we are pushing CO2 emission reduction based on production, it triggers the carbon leakage. And now we are bashing and blaming China and Korea as if they are climate rascal. But to me, I think it's not a fair statement because it's simply a relocation of heavy industry from developed country to developing country. It's not that China and Korea is a climate rascal. It is just a divisional work in the supply chain of the global economic system. I will move on to the next slide. I will show you the UK's case. UK, in the case of UK, the red line is the CO2 emission based on production. The green line is based on consumption. Based on the red line at the production, UK's emission reduction is almost 40% since 1990. But if it is based on the consumption, which means including the imported goods used in the UK, it is only about 16 to 17% reduction during the last 30 years. So 16 to 17% reduction over the past 3 decades, I think it's not a big deal because in view of the energy efficiency improvement of many of the electronic goods and the products we are using. In the case of China, this is the consumption-based red line of Chinese emission. But since it's based on production, the Chinese emission is over-exaggerated compared to the consumption-based emission. The European Union's case is also, this is the production-based emission, but the actual consumption-based emission is much higher. I just want to show you one very dramatic case. I've chosen this country because of the very interesting situation. Imported goods is accounting for almost 45% of Sweden's emission. So if we calculate based on the consumption, Sweden's emission almost double from the production-based emission. This is dramatically showing the dilemma of which data we should use. So now what has to be done? This is my suggestion for what has to be done. For me, as long as we are focusing on climate action, just a matter of mobilizing money and technology, I think it will be very difficult to achieve the target because we have a very limited money and technology that could be mobilized for climate action because of the wrong price signal. To me, what's more important is that we have to fix the carbon price right because internalizing the carbon price into the free market system is one of the most important challenges we are facing now. Since the price signal is wrong, we are facing the difficulty of mobilizing the money and technology. So I often say that free market, that treating carbon as a free goods, and then we cannot have a carbon-free future. So we have to improve free market toward sustainable market. Sustainable market means the market is internalizing the carbon price into its market price. So now, a second very important point is that we have to stop just blaming government and business for the responsibility of climate action. In fact, consumers should bear the final responsibility, because we are the ultimate responsible, because we are using all the products produced by the fossil fuel. But unfortunately, we don't have the system that enable consumers to share the responsibility. I think this is one of the most important dilemma that global climate regime is having. Third important point is that, as I mentioned earlier, we have to stop measuring emission from production. We have to change our focus from production to consumption, because the real reduction, net reduction, can come only from the reduction of consumption. If we are only focusing on reduction of production, we will never be able to succeed, because reduction of production means GDP reduction. And no government will be willing to accept the reduction of GDP. So the focusing on GDP and production will only trigger carbon leakage, and we will never be able to achieve global net reduction. So we have to change our focus from production to consumption right away. This is my suggestion.
Two minutes, Mr. Chung. 2 minutes, please.
I've spoken only 13 minutes now. I thought I have 7 more minutes.
Okay, all right.
I used only 14 minutes. Okay, can I take a few more minutes?
Okay, sure. Okay. 5 minutes, please. Yes.
So, my suggestion for what actions can be taken by the public sector and the consumers. This is something that I believe the public sector can take. First, we have to, one of the very simple things we can do is that CO2 is invisible in many of our economic system and in our society. We have to make invisible CO2 should be visible. One of the very interesting issue I'm always interested to follow is the traffic congestion cost. As you can read in my PPT, Korea's traffic congestion is very serious, and it is actually costing Korea about 3.6% of GDP. We are losing gasoline, and we are wasting working hour because of traffic congestion, and it is almost up to 3.6%. So this kind of data can show that how we should allocate our resources and investment to improve green investment, green infrastructure, such as public transportation. Another very important issue the government can do is applying shadow price of carbon for large investment in order to justify green investment, just like mass transit. In Korea's case, the GTX, you might have heard about it. Korean government has been reviewing the feasibility test for GTX investment, the speed train linking metropolitan areas around Seoul. But many of them has been rejected under the excuse that they are lacking economic feasibility. In other words, under the excuse that it is not profitable. But we have to add the expected CO2 emission reduction as a revenue of this kind of investment project. Then I think those GTX projects could have been already qualified to be approved, and the green investment have been already happened. Another very important issue we can consider is ecological tax reform. The Europeans might know it very well, I think, the reducing income tax and the increasing carbon tax. I think this is a very European issue, a European thing that Europe has been very familiar with. But unfortunately, in the rest of the world, like United States or Korea or in any other world, rest of the world, this ecological tax reform is very, very much unknown and not very understood. I think this is something that many countries has to explore. Another very important point, especially our colleagues from European Union, what I want to say is that the CBAM, cross-border adjustment, carbon border adjustment mechanism, I am very skeptical about it because of the data issue, and it will only trigger a lot of trade dispute among the trading partners, and I think it will trigger endless dispute without much impact. But rather, I would propose the global sectoral roadmap, voluntary roadmap, like a steel, automobile, or the cement, aluminum. They could have the major industries and the countries can sit down and agree on voluntary global sectoral roadmap. I think that could be a lot more effective. And lastly, this is something actually my conclusion, which is in my title. In Korea last year, we had a public opinion survey. We have 48% of the people are ready to pay double the price of electricity, 45% no. Under this situation, I think we can start with the 48%. We cannot wait until whole society have 100% consensus. So we should develop a system where we can work with the 48% of the society. So Germany has a very good example of a green ticket and the green electric price system. I think it is something that we have to learn. And so I believe that this kind of a voluntary personal determined contribution should be the basis for NDC. Without PDC, I don't think we can have NDC. So finally, in order to make the consumers to voluntarily to share the responsibility, we have to design a system like just like a case in Germany. So this is a final challenge we have to work together. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Mr. Chung, you recognized some of the remarkable actions by the Internet Standard Organization as kind of this, the consumer the part to making the London Declaration for climate change issues, to the fostering the active consideration of climate science and association transition, to the development of all new internet standard. That's the big action we have, and the London Declaration Action Plan has been engaged recently to move on this kind of the issues to be the first in the world fastly. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chung. Right. Next, I'm going to move on the keynote. We have the three keynote speech, and then the first one is presented by Christopher Besse, Minister, the Counselor, EU Delegation to Korea. Okay, thank you so much, and the podium is yours. Yes. You may have 20 minutes. Bit less will be good. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So thank you very much. My name is Christophe Besse, and Minister Councillor, and I'm the head of the trade section in the EU delegation here in Seoul. Chairman Moon, Chairman So, Ambassador Ko, Ambassador Kusen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to participate in today's second Korea-EU EV Business Forum. As you know, we are at a pivotal moment in the world's response to the climate and biodiversity emergencies. This decade will be decisive for the world to limit the rise in global temperatures and to take the necessary steps towards net zero. Europe started 2023 with a historic winter heat wave, while Korea was hit by a Siberian cold wave at the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, scientists indicate that we are set to see more of this and more changes for years to come unless we act to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. To overcome these challenges, the EU set out a vision of the future in the European Green Deal and has set ambitious targets for reducing net emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990, and for being the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. The EU's commitment to climate neutrality by 2050 and the intermediate emission reduction targets by 2030 are not simple EU aspirations, but obligations. The EU has cast its net zero target into a European climate law to provide the predictability and transparency that business needs. Proposed by the European Commission in July 2021, the Fit for 55 policy package provides a concrete plan for the European economy to deliver on the European Green Deal and to achieve its climate ambitions. The proposed legislative package includes a set of 13 interconnected proposals, either enhancing existing initiatives or presenting new initiatives across a range of policy areas and economic sectors: climate, energy, fuels, transport, buildings, land use, and forestry. In the transition to a net zero economy, Europe's competitiveness will also rely on its capacity to develop and manufacture the clean technologies that make this green transition possible. In fact, the net zero transformation is already causing huge industrial, economic, and geopolitical shifts, by far the quickest and the most pronounced in our lifetime. It is changing the nature of work and the shape of our industry. Global investment in the clean transition topped $1 trillion last year. That is 30% more than the year before. And if you look at the global market for net zero technologies, it is set to triple by 2030. The next decades will see the greatest industrial transformation of our times. And the transport sector has a major role to play on the path towards carbon neutrality. Today, the transport sector is the largest contributor to EU greenhouse gas emissions. It represents over a quarter of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions, and the road transport segment is the biggest emitter. Therefore, reducing transport emissions is key to meeting the EU's climate neutrality objectives. This is the reason why the EU mobility strategy, which is part of the Green Deal, aims to reduce the carbon footprint of the transport sector by 90% by 2050. The automotive industry is of key importance for the EU economy, and it accounts for about 8% of the EU's GDP. The sector provides direct and indirect jobs in manufacturing, services, construction to 13 million Europeans. However, the shift towards zero-emission mobility is putting Europe's automotive sector in the forefront of a rapid structural transformation towards a green transition. A balanced mix of policy and regulatory tools at the national level, accompanied by international cooperation, will be key to a successful transition. The last years have been extremely challenging for the European automotive industry. We have seen Europe's automotive sector hit by dramatic falls in production and in sales during the COVID pandemic. There was also substantial disruption of supply lines due notably to shortage of semiconductors. In addition, Russia's aggression and the ensuing sanctions on Russia further highlighted the need to reinforce the resilience of global supply chains. On the positive side, the shift from internal combustion engines towards zero and low emission technologies is happening. Combustion engine cars are losing market share. In 2022, electrically chargeable cars accounted for at least 1 in every 5 new cars sold across the EU. 21% of all new cars sold in the EU are now electrically chargeable cars, compared to 18% in 2021, 10% in 2020, and only 3% in 2019. In fact, electric car sales increased nearly 17-fold between 2016 and 2022, with almost 2 million fully electric vehicles sold in 2022 on the EU market. This growth is likely to continue as European manufacturers are investing heavily in the development of new electric models and the production plants of batteries. Moreover, battery technology advances in the area of electromobility are of particular importance for consumers. The best performing electric cars now have a range around 500 kilometers, with some going well beyond. The EU has a challenging task to put in place the right framework conditions in order to facilitate the transition towards a green transformation of the road transport sector, which is responsible for 20% of total EU greenhouse gas emissions. We have set ourselves the target to have at least 30 million electric vehicles on the roads by the end of this decade. This is a significant increase from the 3.8 million electric passenger cars on the European streets in 2021. Reaching this goal demands a set of measures to steer member states, companies, and consumers in the right direction. Reduction of CO2 emission standards have proven to be a key driver for innovation. Stricter targets, applying already since 2020, have triggered a surge in the uptake of electric vehicles across Europe. As part of the Fit for 55 policy package, the European Commission has proposed to set even more ambitious targets to cut CO2 emissions for cars and vans. Last month, the European legislators cast in law new ambitious rules setting targets to cut CO2 emissions for cars by 55% and for vans by 50% from 2030 to 2034. By 2035, all new cars and vans sold in the EU will need to be zero-emission vehicles. As part of the Fit for 55 policy package, European legislators have reached a political agreement for an ambitious new regulation for the deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure in the EU. New rules will require member states to expand their charging capacity in line with zero-emissions car sales. New rules also include mandatory targets to deploy recharging points along the EU's main highways. An electric charging point every 60 kilometers and a hydrogen refueling station every 200 kilometers. Moreover, a number of other measures have been proposed to support our economy to meet the challenges of the transition, and especially for strategic sectors such as automotive. In particular, I would like to highlight our policy of industrial alliances. This is a useful tool to accelerate activities that would not develop otherwise and to attract private investors. A good example of the effectiveness of this approach is the European Battery Alliance, launched in 2017. This industry alliance will play a critical role in facilitating the production of batteries to power at least 6 million electric vehicles every year by 2025, and by 2030, the EU should be able of manufacturing enough batteries each year to power some 11 million electric cars. As you know, the production of batteries requires raw materials, and demand for electric vehicles' battery raw materials will rise significantly. For lithium only, demand will rise 12 times by 2030, and 21 times by 2050. 4 times for cobalt and natural graphite. However, Europe, just like Korea, is not a resource-rich continent. Our domestic supply will provide only a fraction of the critical raw materials that we need. And we cannot replace one dependency on fossil fuels by another on raw materials. This is the reason why last month the European Commission has proposed the EU Critical Raw Material Act. The EU aims to leverage the strength and opportunities of its single market and strengthen the EU's cooperation with reliable trading partners globally to diversify and enhance the resilience of EU critical raw material supply chains. The EU will notably create a critical raw materials club with reliable partners that are keen to develop their own critical raw materials industries. Closer and more diverse trade ties are the way to reduce our dependencies and the vulnerabilities that result from them. Another industrial alliance that I could mention is the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, launched in 2020. Hydrogen has a potentially significant role to play as a decarbonization pathway, notably for heavy-duty vehicles. We also need skills. In fact, 2023 is the European Year of Skills. We need major and sustained investment to support the or upskilling of automotive workers in new technologies and manufacturing practices. Our European Skills Agenda sets out a skills response to the new economic challenges. The EU welcomes Korea's climate ambition towards net zero by 2050. As our own experience in the EU shows, long-term climate objectives require bold action already now. And therefore, we look forward to further deepening the EU-Korea cooperation on climate, energy and environment, and to agree on the conclusion of a comprehensive EU-Korea Green Partnership. The EU and Korea are important trading partners, as you know, and we should continue close cooperation in the context of our bilateral and multilateral engagements. In this context, the consistent application of the large body of internationally harmonized rules under the UN ECE is of crucial importance for promoting trade and market access. I'm referring to the rules on safety of electric vehicles and safety of batteries in particular. Any unjustified regulatory divergence would only amplify the existing challenges in terms of market uncertainties and supply chain in the automotive sector. It is therefore needless to say that the EU and Korea should join forces when it comes to the promotion and implementation of international standards for new energy vehicles. In conclusion, flattening the emission curve by 2050 will only be possible if we take bold climate action together. The EU's experience shows that with a proper previous speaker, Director Chung, showed concerning the UK, this decoupling of the emissions and the GDP slopes. Sustainability can be a source of growth and jobs that will last. In this context, the EU is ready to support and willing to work with Korean partners for a clean transition. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by wishing you a very successful 10th IEV Expo and by expressing my thanks to the Global EV Association Network for the invitation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Councillor, Mr. Christophe Besset. Thank you for, yes, this is just right time. Thank you for sharing the current status and prospect of the e-mobility in the EU and the way to cooperate with the Korean market. Thank you so much. And next speaker, the virtually will be the maid from the Hyundai Mobis in Europe, Mr. Alex Mashika. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation.
Pronunciation is good.
Okay. Microphone is yours. 20 minutes, please.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Dear Chairman, dear Chairman, dear ambassadors, dear distinguished guests. Thank you for attaching me to Europe. I actually just returned from Europe, from the Vienna Engine and Motor Symposium last Friday, where we had keynote and an exhibition towards European customers. I'm based in Seoul, and I would have loved to be with you today in Jeju, would it not have been so tightly after my return from Europe. My name is Axel Maschka. I'm the head of the Mobis Business Division. And I would like to talk to you, next please. I would like to talk to you today about the Mobis Mobility Move. Next page, please. And how Mobis can support European and global EV makers to get the European Green Deal coming and the phase out of ICE in 2035 supported, as well as to do what Mobis can to prepare the future of mobility. Next, please. You might ask yourself, who is Mobis? For the last 45 years, Mobis provided global customers with excellent mobility solutions based on technical innovations. In 2021, Mobis has been ranked 6th among global suppliers, thanks to a period of steady growth, thanks to the trust of our valued customers. We have been developing along with famous automakers from Europe, from US, from China, and from Korea, and we never stop. As you can see, thanks to the EV shift, we were witnessing a major growth in 2022 and even higher acceleration this year. Because unlike many of our competitors, Hyundai Mobis does not depend on combustion engines. Next, please. To support our growth, we can build on a global network that brings us close to our customers wherever they are. We have been satisfying local value chain needs with 38 factories in the world, 10 R&D centers, and 5 sales offices in key regions, focusing on close partnership. In Europe, we have 3 different plants. 2 of them are dedicated to electric mobility. We have our sales offices in Frankfurt, Eschborn, as well as a large R&D center. And we are planning, not yet ready for disclosure, another 1 or 2 sites in various European countries focusing on electric vehicles. Next, please. Our business in Europe is sixfold. No? We are, of course, active in modules, as Hyundai Mobis is the world's largest module supplier. We are active in lighting, where in Europe we supply to French and Italian and some Czech vehicles, the front and rear lights. We are active in chassis and in steering, where we had major breakthroughs recently, both in braking and in electronic stability controls, as well as now our traditional strength of IVI connected vehicles. We are active in electrification. I come to this in a second. And we are having an autonomous driving team in Europe that applies vehicles to the European roads, as well as create some worldwide relevant foundational algorithms and principles. Based on book business, thanks to our advanced technology and our trusted customers, our growth forecast for Europe shows a remarkable 44% year-over-year growth until the end of the decade. Next, please. Now, in electric vehicles, Mobis is active in the famous skateboard architectures, and we are the core supplier of the famous eGMP platform of Hyundai and Kia Motors. And you see everything that is marked here is our product, the front auxiliary drive, the electric braking, the in-wheel motors, the rear drive, the 800-volt fast charging power electronics and systems, a unique Mobis technology, and finally at the centerpiece, our battery pack based on 800-volt battery solution. Next, please. Our platform has won major accolades in the market. So has been last year the World Car of the Year, Ioniq 5, the European Car of the Year, Kia EV6, and very recently you might have noticed that the Ioniq 6 was awarded World Car of the Year 2023. More interior space, less space for engine and drivetrain, up to 300 miles of autonomy and faster charging than anyone else in the market are the unique features that our architecture is offering to our customers. Next, please. Now, that is now important, and now come to the core of this conference and the core of Mobis' contribution. As a supplier, you might be aware that we are typically thinking 3, 4, 5 years ahead. We are today trying to win business that comes into the market to the consumers in 2026 or 2027 only, because it takes about 3 years to jointly develop a technology into a serial producible model. So therefore, today I want to give you a short insight on where we are working now on to create a future of electrification to make electric vehicles ever more attractive for consumers, ever more suitable for consumers, and of course, drive the change that my 2 previous speakers have just mentioned before. I will go into enhanced electrification on the electric driving units and battery system, and I will show that this is not enough for electric cars. Auxiliary functionalities, and I will take today steering and braking, are instrumental to make real electric vehicles attractive for consumers. Next, please. So let's walk through step by step. We have been supplying battery systems since 2009. Click the video, please. You can see the number of cars we are producing battery systems on. We have been done more than 1 million last year. Our best-in-class BSA with 800-volt architecture makes vehicles drive longer and be charged faster. In less than 18 minutes, you can charge 80% of a battery's capacity. And in just 5 minutes, you can charge for 100 kilometers of driving. This shows now to today's production of Hyundai vehicles on all different categories, including fuel cells and multi-hybrid. There are a few others in US and in Europe that are coming that you will be surprised about, but I cannot announce yet today. Next page, please. So the core of any electric car is, of course, the electric drive unit. Here we integrate, click the video, please. You can, of course, integrate the inverter, the gear reducer, and the electric motor into this EDU. And we are now working on the generation 3 of it. What does this mean? Based on a higher power on optimized design, motor rotation will go up to 19,000 RPM. This allows for a power density that is 50%, 1/2 better than current Ioniq 5 in production. So you see how much technology will move forward and is able to move forward to make electric vehicles ever more attractive. This system, next generation, will also feature silicon carbide semiconductors that can convert the 800 volt to power, and where Hyundai Mobis will feature in-house design and in-house produced semiconductors. Next, please. Next, please. And on this one now, we look on the auxiliary system. First of all, let's look at the steering system. When we disconnect the steering wheel from the actuation of the wheels, we can actually move the cabin and the steering wheel freely into the vehicle. When we now apply this also to the rear wheels, we can actually control all 4 wheels, which gives you stability on higher speeds, but also maneuverability in dense traffic environments. You know, the bigger the cars get on one side, the more dense the traffic on the other side. This becomes ever more important. Turning radius goes down by up to 23%. And when we now go one step forward and fully actuate each vehicle independently, then vehicles can actually and really move sidewards or even turn on the spot. This is nothing short than a revolution in automobile since 137 years, and only becomes possible once we start electrifying the powertrain. Now, next, please. And now we look at the same in braking. Because as in steering, also in braking, we are now disconnecting the pedal from the actuation. Mobis started braking business in 2005. And the last 2 decades, we have produced millions of braking solutions for all types of vehicles. Today, I want to focus on the future, on the electric pedal, the Mobis electric brake, and the electromechanical brake. What does it mean? Instead of a vacuum booster, we have an electric booster. The electric booster becomes independent from the combustion engine to air intake and amplify. Second, it can allow regenerative braking, very important for electric vehicles, to make sure that much of the movement energy can be recuperated and put back to battery. And once we have the IMEB in place, which is already today a state of mass production and for various vehicles, we can go next step and say, why don't we do the actuation? And you see here caliper and drum. Why don't we do this electrify? And when you think this is future, this is actually tomorrow already. We are quoting for some of the largest European OEMs, for some of their largest platforms, the electric drum already today. So to be launched in maximum 3 years, braking on a pedal is history. And again, we can then put the pedal wherever we want in the car. And for you, important also the safety, meaning the built-in redundancy and the fail-safe design allows a vehicle to stop safely, even if 1 or 2 wheels should fail to operate or for any electric or mechanical problem. We still can guarantee a safe braking. So the new system is much better than the one you know today on the vehicle. Next, please. So normally I would be finishing here, but I was just in Shanghai on the auto show, and I thought it's important for you as the audience, as not everybody could come to China recently, to understand what has happened in China on electric vehicles and on consumer preferences over the COVID period. Next, please. I felt a dramatic change in China EVs when I went to Shanghai. And most importantly, some examples you see here now, like east-west displays, full range, cameras all over, immersive design of electronic and the consumer. And when you believe you only show this in demonstrators at the booth, it was wrong. When you come into a restaurant, you saw exactly the same BYD, NIO, XPeng. In the evening, parking in front of the restaurant, 10, 20 vehicles, they are driving around. That's why suddenly many of the industry are quite scared, because China has not stopped evolving and is evolving much more holistically, not only electric, but also consumer interior and consumer interface. And here is now on the next page what we in Mobis provide to support this trend. Next, please. I bring you two examples here today how this part of innovation is possible once you have electric cars. First, a 34-inch ultra-large screen curved display that allows to adapt the vehicle to self-driving and automated driving, passenger car versus driver, or at night when you take the swivel down, just focusing on speed, or a day when you want to have a video during traffic jam. So totally new innovation, and all this becomes possible thanks to latest China and Korean technology. Next, please. And one step forward, and also a hot topic in China, but also around the world, augmented reality head-up display. And when you are driving yourself in Seoul, you know this. You have many exits, one after the other, a few hundred yards, 3 different exits on the highway, easily to take the wrong one. And Korea already innovatively marks the lane in blue, green, and pink colors. But often either the color is gone or cars are parked on it, so you don't see actually where the lane is. Here we do this all virtually in front of your eye, in 3 dimensions, moving according to where the spot is, alerting on obstacles, marking the lane, giving you a traffic sign, and warning if necessary. For me, this is the ultimate ADAS, or Advanced Driving Assistance solution. And why did I bring this today? Because this shows the global state of automobiles. It's a European startup based in the United Kingdom who brings the intelligent and the holographic software-based unit. It's a Korean supplier, Mobis, who is industrializing it. And it's an American vehicle who will be world first launching of this technology. So you see, we at Mobis, we have solutions for the future of automobile. And once it's electric, it's only accelerating in terms of technology. So now I say thank you very much. And before concluding, I think it's important, as you are now in beautiful Jeju, when you travel back to Seoul, or you happen to be in Beijing or Shanghai or in any other mega city, you will see that we need also to think about the future of mobility. Next, please. And so to conclude the Mobis mobility move, I would like to show you what Mobis believes is the future of urban and mega city mobility, not too far from now. Next, please, video. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions and our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Alex, do you know your president, Mr. Cho Sung-wan, elected as a new ISO president?
Yes, I thought this when you introduced yourself. He gonna be your new boss.
Yeah, that's why I frequently visit the Mobis headquarters to discuss with him a lot for the ISO, the Council and Central Secretariat.
Very good. Next time,
Okay.
please come by. I'm sitting
gonna visit the
actually
office
next
too.
door to him,
Okay.
100 meters, 50 meters from him. Yeah, and
Sure.
we can have a coffee before or after. I was just with him in Vienna,
Right.
returning on Sunday.
Okay,
No,
thank you
he's
so
very
much.
proud of his new job and looking forward to see you soon in person.
Yes, yes, and I hope the Hyundai Mobis will be the number. The world number 3. The tier 1 supplier in a year. Okay.
That is my target. It is my
Okay.
target to get it there.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, which is the last of the keynote speaker, of Mr. Jimmy Sell, Head of Trade Council, Ambassador of Denmark. Okay, podium is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all of you for making all of this possible today. I think, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Jeju and all the organizers behind this show to make everything possible. I think basically what I would like to, instill in everybody today is that we need as much leadership as possible, and preferably joint leadership. Because if there's one thing that I learned looking at the Green Revolution, which needs to happen, is that I'm always mesmerized by the amount of challenges that we have, but sometimes also equally mesmerized about the solutions that we have available. So maybe kickstarting the conclusion, we need to work together on this. My aim is to spend the next 18 minutes I have left, looking at the moderator here, to make sure that these 4 stones will not be left unturned. That these are the 4 things that we will learn by listening to the presentation today. Basically, why is it that Denmark and Korea is so comparable? What is it that basically unites us? How and why did Denmark transition from black to green? What ignited that whole paradigm shift, and why can we actually do it again? I would really like to also look at what governance model did we build? How did we actually engage with different stakeholders? Again, the whole leadership element. And of course, what is the cost of going green, which we actually have been touching upon quite a lot. And of course, look at cost is in brackets, but I promise you there will be a surprise later on. So, to kickstart, what is the number one thing that Denmark and Korea have in common? Besides the obvious, we are a small country, I would say locked between some giants in our immediate neighborhood. Then probably the one thing that we have in common is that our greatest resource is human. It's human capital. I can guarantee you, as a Dane, we have nothing in terms of natural resources. We have no more oil left. We have no precious resources, nothing. We have people, that's basically what we have. So I think from a point of working together, what Denmark have done and is doing, I think definitely is a path that Korea can choose anytime soon. To be honest, my very good colleague Gian came to me last week and said, Jimmy, you know what, there's a big conference in Jeju, we need to go, we need to talk about electrical vehicles. And I think my first question was what? Because to be honest, this is a good representative of the Danish, I would say, policy on cars. Denmark has a 180% tax on cars, which means that our policy is basically don't drive, bike. I don't know if you know who this gentleman up here is. This is the Crown Prince of Denmark. On a Monday morning, cycling his 2 sons to school. So basically what you're looking at is that's his oldest son in the middle. So these are the 2 future kings of Denmark. Biking on a Monday morning, looking a little bit like the rest of us on a Monday morning, a little bit grumpy, everything is a bit tough. But basically, we have the way that we see our transport system is that if you can use the bicycle, please do it. But if you use the car, you better build a proper incentive system. So we plan to have close to 1 million cars by 2030 that are run on sustainable fuels, which basically means that our whole fleet of cars will be replaced. Fossil fuels, we are of course kicking out. The main thing that I would like to point out today is that how this transition actually become possible. To catch up on the quick history, 1970s came, and I think the glory days of the 50s and 60s were gone. Economic crisis was looming high. We had the OPEC oil crisis, which basically meant that the cost of oil went up by 400%. That's a problem for Denmark when you import, at that time, 99% of your energy, 92% of that is oil. So in Denmark, we install car-free Sundays, and basically the best way to really start an argument with a Dane back then was to basically let the power running. So we said we need to definitely do something differently than having oil. So we have two options. Either we can go on wind, or we can go on nuclear. At that time, debate was extremely heated. Denmark decided not to go down the nuclear way, not to have nuclear facilities on Danish soil, and focus exclusively on wind. Today, the Danish standpoint has been, I would say, modernized, and we do see the partnership between nuclear and offshore wind as part of the future energy mix, for sure. 1980s came, we installed the first wind project, and also the first offshore wind project by 1991. And we started seeing that this could actually be a really good export case. So moving through the decades, what we saw is that we can easily replace a lot of the energy needs we have with both onshore and offshore wind. By 2000, we saw that, okay, what if we can actually dream of a carbon neutral future? And by now, we're basically starting to see what if we can actually fuel a revolution led on green energy. So fast forwarding today, if you look at the development between the different, I would say, energy input that Denmark has, this is the Danish energy mix. There are three trends that I would like to point out. One is, of course, that fossil fuels, which is oil and coal, is moving down, is diminishing. Our uptake of renewable energy is moving up, and our utilization of energy in total is moving down. We have currently around, on a normal day, 53% of our energy comes from wind. On windy days, it's 140%, which means we take the excess 40% and we sell to other countries around us. By 2030, we expect 100% of our electricity to come from green sources. We just decided to move forward that target, or move it closer to us by 2028. We expect 100% of our gas to be run on domestic and green biogas. And of course, we would like 70% climate reduction target by 2030 already, which I'll go a little bit more in detail on in some of the future slides. So if I can point out one thing that I would like to instill in everybody with the presentation today is, of course, the need for partnerships. And I think these are some of our experiences that I would actually like to say are quite generic, that you can use for future reference. I think I was back in Denmark working in our climate unit when the new Danish government came into play. And they came into power by saying, you know what, dear Denmark, we would like to save 60% of carbon emissions by 2030. Danish consumers, Danish voters came back and said, that's not ambitious enough. You need to figure out how to do 70%. And the government said, we don't have the solutions. We don't know how to do that. The Danish people said, but then come up with the solutions. So what the Danish government did is that they created 13 climate partnerships from some of the most energy-intensive industries that we have. And these partnerships has around 10 different stakeholders. It's a mixture of some of the leading multinational companies that we have. You have NGOs around the table, R&D, academia, government institutions. And basically what happened is that we locked them inside a room for 2 months and said, you're not going to be able to come out before you deliver 10 recommendations to the government on how to reach 70%. So they worked within their sectors, non-stop, delivered recommendations to the Danish politicians, which also means that every single year in the Danish parliament, this comes up to be evaluated. So this has been instilled by a certain law that no matter which kind of government that comes into play the next 7 years, they will be measured upon this. The other benefit it has is that these solutions have the total backing of the system. So private sector, NGOs, government institutions, everybody has basically vouched for these solutions, and this is something that we need to comply with. So we have basically a toolbox that we can always look within these different sectors and say, what is it actually from a technical perspective, government perspective, what do we actually need to do? But of course, Denmark being a small country, close to 6 million people, we are responsible for 0.1% of global emissions. It might be nice and dandy that we reach 70%, but it's not going to save the world. So in order for us to try to really align with the Paris Agreement and try to do our little, I would say, contribution to help push the world in a certain direction, we need strong partners. And we definitely see Korea as being that strong power that we can really liaise with. 2011, with the assistance of President Lee Myung-bak and of then Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, we created our Green Growth Alliance. Since then, it's been moving very, very fast with all these different partnerships. We launched a Green Strategic Partnership, which is a government-to-government cooperation. We also said that Korea is going to be part of 15 countries that we have a special obligation to drive future green growth with. And we were especially proud during the P4G summit in 2021, where we signed a comprehensive partnership agreement together with Korea. We were the first country in the world to sign that agreement with Korea, but we understand we are not the last country to do that, which I think is extremely positive. We of course also move on a city-to-city level. The Danish Embassy's cooperation with Jeju is extremely strong. We also focus on signing partnership agreements within different cities. And just last week, we had 35 Korean stakeholders in Denmark for the Wind Europe event, looking at across the aisle with different kind of technical solutions. From a Danish perspective, how we always see how to drive change is that public sector can identify the problems, private sector comes with the solutions. And I think from our perspective, we're looking at some really strong company contributions here in Korea as well. Good example is Vestas, the world's #1 wind turbine manufacturer, have just decided to place their EPIC headquarters here in Korea, in Seoul, and also establish a production site for windmills. CIP, Ørsted, some of the biggest wind developers in the world, have gone above and beyond the local content requirements that are here. And I think especially on that, there's a really important thing that I would like to share, is that we see it from the Danish side. We have a special partnership model. There's, for us, no reason to go in and directly compete with any kind of local industry. We see that Korea have fantastic industrial capacity. So basically, if you want to construct an offshore wind farm, I think Korea has 8 out of the 10 solutions that are available that you need. But maybe Denmark can move in on 2 of them. And that's where the partnership magic happens. So you kind of look at it from a supply chain perspective, put them together, basically a little bit like Lego, and see where is that #1 fit. I think some of the presenters today has touched upon it. I'll try to go a little bit more in detail of what is actually the cost of the green energy. Because I think it's a dichotomy that I hear constantly in any kind of international setting, is that yes, green is good, it might be nice, but what is the cost? And what are basically the barrier for implementing green energy at the pace that it needs to be implemented before it's actually, I would say, gonna go global. This is a variation of a graph we've seen before today. What I would like to highlight is that if you look at the development in Denmark since 1990, we managed to grow our GDP by 62%, lowering our energy consumption, lowering our water consumption, and of course our CO2 emissions. What is important about this graph, what I would like to instill in everybody, that it is possible to decouple economic growth from CO2 consumption. That is possible, has been done. So basically, the way to green growth is already here. An argument that I also hear sometimes is that, you know what, Jimmy, we live in a new age. Energy security is the most important thing. And if I look at Denmark having the highest amount of energy security in all of Europe by using renewable energy, we have access to our energy grid, I think it's 99.997% of the year. It's only 25 minutes a year that a Danish consumer would experience some kind of outage in the grid. So by using renewable energy, it's actually good for energy security. I also hear another argument is that, yes, but electricity from offshore wind farms, biogas, can actually be quite expensive. Again, looking at the numbers, Denmark is definitely in the more, I would say, generous end of the energy prices. And actually digging into the energy price, that price we have up there includes 60% tax. And the trick here is that these 60% tax is ring-fenced to actually go into the investment of new renewable energy projects. So you have a model that really, I would say, is highly incentivized for two things. One is to promote investment within the renewable energy sector. The other thing is actually to drive up the cost of electricity, which is also why we have a company like Danfoss who has been specialized in figuring out how do we actually make sure that we can save as much energy as possible. Another argument I also hear quite often is renewable energy will have a dramatic impact on jobs. That's true. It will have an effect on jobs. It will create new jobs like any other new industry will. Our main, I would say, capital of fishing in Denmark one generation ago was the harbor of Esbjerg. That harbor today is, I would say, one of the main capitals of offshore wind farms in Europe. This is basically where all the material for offshore wind farms is being sourced out from. And these are the amount of jobs that we have created these past 20 or 30 years. Basically, 25% of the jobs in that municipality is directly related to energy. So really, really good business case. And of course, the future is moving forward. We have decided to build these 10 gigawatt of offshore wind islands, which can power 10 million homes. And I think with the Esbjerg Declaration this summer was a very proud moment when, I would say, the EU, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany came together and said, okay, let's do 150 gigawatt of offshore wind, which is basically enough to make sure we reach 50% of our climate neutrality target alone. So a phenomenal business case. So the figures I would like to round off is that we look at the direct numbers. This is not from, I would say, subsidized industries. This is not from industries related to energy. This is pure energy, pure direct numbers. 11% of our exports comes from energy. 76,000 jobs, 3.4% of our GDP. And of course, many of these numbers from a Korean perspective can be multiplied with 10 because you are 10 times as many people as we are. So I think if I look at the top 3 advices or top 3 things that I would like to basically be talking to all of you about today is that I think what we learned from the Danish side, don't let a good crisis go to waste. For us, it was the 70s with the OPEC and the rising of energy prices. We see now a Russian aggression towards Ukraine that has dramatically changed the whole geopolitical landscape. I think we all have a tremendous good opportunity to actually capitalize on that, building more renewable energy sources, which can actually improve our energy security. Of course, also having the need for partnerships. I think I'm constantly surprised by the pace in Korea. I've been here for 3 years, and I think one of the first things that I notice whenever I meet with Korean developers of any kind of project is that they will usually ask me, a project like this, Jimmy, how long time does that take in Denmark? I'll say, maybe it'll take 6-7 years. And they'll say, in Korea, it'll take 2 years. And I really believe that. The world's fastest development is happening here. And I think the last thing I would like to maybe round off saying that I would really like to welcome that we once and for all say goodbye to that old dichotomy that green is expensive. Because green is a phenomenal business case. It will happen. The future is here. It's just a matter of how quickly can you get into the market. So I think with those words, I think the future is already here. I would like to thank everybody for your patience, for your time, and your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy, for the case sharing for Korea-Denmark cooperation in energy sectors. Thank you so much. Okay, this we take the all the remarkable presentation, and then we are going to move on for the panel discussion, leading by Mr. Ali Izad or Izad? Izadi, okay, head of Bloomberg, okay. So we may be able to take a little the time to set up the chairs on the podium. Is correct? I don't know what style of that. Okay. So before moving on, I'm going to share our lunch. I'm going to ask all the panelists, including our chairman, to be seated on the stage. Okay.
We've already seen a lot of great presentations earlier around various aspects of cooperation between EU and Korea on e-mobility. What I'll try to do is dig a little bit deeper and get to the specifics with our panelists. And with that, maybe I'll start off with our first speaker online who hasn't been introduced yet. So if I may, I would like to start with Dr. Han-Ho Lee, President of Jeonbuk Institute of Automotive Convergence Technology. Dr. Lee, if I may ask you, how do you see the current status of cooperation between EU and Korea on e-mobility?
Yes, 편의를 돕기 위해서 저는 한국말로 좀.
Yes, I'd like to speak in Korean for better providing my ideas.
한 EU의 자동차 산업에 있어서의 협력은
The cooperation in e-mobility has been in a lot of sectors.
저도 유럽 주요국 독일이나 프랑스
Some major countries in Europe, such as Austria, France,
세간의 협력
and other countries I visited for many seminars myself.
뭐 전기 자동차 산업
In terms of e-mobility, I think there are three sectors cooperations are possible.
소위 전기 자동차를 트라이전스 인더스트리라고 저희들도 표현합니다. 과거 내연기관 자동차에
In the past, in combustive engine cars, we cooperated in ended products. However, in terms of EV, manufacturing and other related services and infrastructure can be cooperated. So, the cooperation can be expanded. So, who are the entities of cooperations? Cooperation is the center of competition. But EV is in infancy, so government cooperation is also important. So many countries are pursuing their own benefits, so that can be a burden for other countries' EV competition. Because EV companies are relying on foreign companies. There are three major markets. It's the US, Europe, and China. So its dependency is about 70% in three major countries. Recently, Korea is not leading Chinese companies, so the cooperation with China is very important as well for our development. Policy coordination is also needed. Car industry is significant in EU countries and Korea. And the broadness is very remarkable. In terms of environment and safety, many other governments are seeking sustainability by introducing a lot of policies. In Korea, trade and investment requires a lot of strategies. We still don't have standardization in technology, so global standard is important and it should be realized with a cooperation with European countries and Korea. And another one is businesses cooperation. First of all, technology cooperation is needed, and which has to be followed by capital cooperation. After technology cooperation, direct investment is needed so that we can establish factories for production. And then third, civil society's communication. I was the member of Korea EU FTA, so I joined a lot of meetings. Through the meetings, I realized that civil society's role was very important. In this regard, in cooperation, policies have to be changed to include civil society. Civil society is very interested in environment. But so far, we don't see a lot of active cooperation among civil societies in European countries and Korea. So we need to seek deeper cooperation in this sector. The most important thing is companies' cooperation. Korea battery companies are investing a lot in European countries. So,
투자를 구축하지 않느냐 하는 의혹이
Koreans question, so why don't we increase investment in Korea itself? However, EU is an important market for Korean EV companies. So for both countries' interest, we need cooperation as well.
EU 투자 진출뿐이 아니라
And not only
EU
EU investment,
한국 기업과의 기술 협력 그리고 자본 협력
technology and capital cooperation is needed among EU and Korea.
EU 기업들이 한국보다는 약간 중국에 대한
EU companies are increasing their investment in China rather than Korea. However, Korea is very near China, so those countries need to seek investment in Korea as well.
한국과의 이 한국 자동차 기업의 협력 사업에서 여러 가지 이슈들을
I saw a lot of issues in terms of cooperation, in terms of EV. The most important thing was supply chain.
첨단 기술 산업이 많이 발전해 있고
Korea has a lot of high techs, and automotive industry is very high ranking. Korea, Hyundai and Kia is number 3 in terms of automotive industry. That means our capability is very high.
그렇지만 한국의 거의 공급망에 참여하고 있는 기업들, 즉 서플라이어들에
But
대한 이러한 정보는 매우 부족하다고 봅니다.
we lack information of the suppliers.
물론 이 서플라이어 관련 정보는 기업의 비밀 사항이기
Of course,
때문에
it's
접근이 어렵다고도
confidential for companies to reveal those information.
최근에 전 세계적으로 이러한 공급망에 있어서의 협력이 매우
However, supply chain cooperation is becoming more important. Therefore, we need to seek more actively the cooperation in EU countries and Korea to stabilize supply chain.
공급망 기업 리스트를 작성해 왔습니다.
We have listed supply chains.
지역적으로 400개에 달하는
Locally,
서플라이어와
there are more than 400 first-tier suppliers.
적극 참여하고 있습니다.
They are joining actively these supply chains.
이러한 400개의
So,
업체들이
these 400 companies could cooperate with European companies in the future.
IT 분야에 상당한 경쟁력을 가지고
Korea is an IT powerhouse.
누구나 알듯이
As you may know,
바퀴에 컴퓨터,
future
스마트폰이라는
mobility is about everything is connected with mobility, including smartphone. So IT is a big deal in the future. The leaders are Samsung, SK, LG. So they are preparing for future mobility as well because they are IT powerhouses.
이 다양한 산업 분야의 한국 기업에 대한 정보는 상당히 부족하다고도 보겠습니다.
But we still lack information about the Korean companies. So we need to create a venue for communication, such as business table or future round table, so that we can seek deeper cooperation.
그리고 이러한 협력에 있어서 한국 정부 또 저희 지하철과 같은 공공 기관의 역할도
And the public offices' roles are also important for cooperation, including government. And B2B cooperation has to be also be sought.
지속 가능한 성장 기반이 될 수 있다는 점에서
And this can be the foundation for sustainability.
정부 간 협력 그리고
So
시민 단체 간의 협력
government cooperation can be extended to civil society's cooperation.
여기서 일단 마무리하겠습니다.
So this concludes my ideas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. And apologies to fellow panelists. I'll have to ask you to please keep your answers more brief. Otherwise, we're going to be running into lunch. If I may, Dr. Mitchell, I would like to bring you into the discussion. You've been a long Korea watcher. How do you see the current state of cooperation between the EU and Korea?
I think previous speaker has gone through the whole gamut of cooperation. I'd like to underwrite the role of citizens and civil society, because on the whole, EVs are not about manufacturers. They should be about the users. And maybe the users have to pay the right price and so on, but the users should be have a voice in how the tool, which is the EV, is used, and thus the environment that they operate in. So I think we've not gone far enough in that direction so far.
On the question of consumers, if I may ask a follow-on, and I would like to bring Mr. Lam as well as Mr. Marshko into the discussion. So earlier this morning, we heard from the IEC representative, Ms. Gabrielle Erel, around adoption of EVs, and also Council Minister Besse reviewing the statistics. The EU is already about twice the rate of EV adoption than Korea, so just over 20% of EVs, 20% of passenger vehicle sales in the EU last year for EVs, whereas Korea is just around 10%. Maybe if I may ask Mr. Marshko first, how come the EU is further along than Korea on EV adoption, even though there are many strong Korean EV battery manufacturers?
So right now the part makers are working closely with European
제가
car makers.
유럽 제조업체들 그리고 투자자들과 긴밀하게 협력을 하고 있는데요.
Vice versa, we also have some activities, but as the number of manufacturers is more limited in Korea.
한국에는 제조업체 수가 제한이 되어 있습니다.
But maybe not as much focused on EV.
제가 전기차나 배터리 쪽에 집중을 덜 했을 수도 있겠지만 큰 차이가 있는 것은 한국에는 일단 언어 인터페이스 문제가 있을 수가 있습니다. 또 반면 시간 문제도 있습니다. 제조업체들이 깨달은 것이 전기차 같은 경우에는 예를 들어 연료전지라든지 이런 대체도 고려를 해야 하고 전동화도 진행이 되고 있는데 OEM 그리고 제조업체의 파워도 강력하죠. 또 인센티브와 보조금에 따라서 장려가 될 수도 있고요. 한국의 경우에는 유럽이 보조금이나 지금 제가까지 말씀드린 것들을 보면 한국하고 유럽하고 현황의 차이가 있을 수 있습니다. 노르웨이의 사례도 보여드렸고요. 서울이랑 제주도 보시면 전동화에 따르면 거의 1위에 가깝죠. 그리고 다른 지역 예를 들어서 산이 많은 부분 이런 데는 현재 전기차의 기술을 도입하기가 어려울 수도 있습니다. 따라서 기술이 도입이 되기 전까지, 발전이 되기 전까지는 전통차를 사용할 수밖에 없는 지역도 있습니다.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lam, if I may get your view.
Yeah, I think in that sense, most of the speakers already covered this quite adequately and quite well. So I think the only thing I would add is that I think initially when EU started pushing out the incentive, government incentive, Germany, UK, at that time UK is still within EU, and France, I think Korea is still watching their development and see how EV is going to go. No one feel that the EV adoption. I think most of the Asia country, with the exception of China, still at that time they were kind of skeptical about whether this will take off in a big way. So initially, most of the stuff is still. I remember bringing our first sports car here in 2014. That was really early, and when we go to the government and ask for incentive and ask for policy, and they just said, no, we don't have this kind of thing. But whereas in Europe, I already get all the regulation, working on IEC and getting all the charging standard. So I think typically, I think it's part of culture as well. I think is that Asia country want to watch some development from the European market, which is much bigger, and how that developed before they really put their weight behind it. And the good thing about Asia businesses like Korea, all the big Hyundai, Kia, they know they can catch up very quickly if this is the market to go. So I think they've learned what Europe has done and what US has done, and now they caught them up very quickly. So I think that's the only thing that I have to add in terms of what the other has contributed.
Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
I would like to switch gears now and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that have come up in the relationship between EU and Korea. Earlier, when former climate change minister Chung was talking about the carbon border adjustment mechanism, he was somewhat critical. Of course, outside of EU and Korea, recently with the US Inflation Reduction Act, many of US allies have also expressed some concerns around how the US is giving competitive advantage to manufacturers in that country at the disadvantage of some of its trading partners. We're starting to see many countries around the world explore policies that take advantage of support for green technologies while at the same time trying to boost domestic jobs. So with the EU, in addition to the CBAM, we also have the Critical Raw Materials Act that's trying to boost domestic supplies. If I may bring you in, Mr. Council Besse, is the criticism of policies such as CBAM valid, or are there room for more cooperation between Korea and EU on these policies? And I know that's a pretty loaded question, but
is it on? Yes. Yes, of course. So the CBAM issue that has made the EU not so popular in this country. I think we are quite famous for this draft legislation. But before going to that, I would like to mention that of course we have to put the framework, and the framework is the FTA. So we have the FTA between the EU and Korea that is in place since 2011, that is delivering. I mean, we are talking of 130 billion euros of trade every year between the EU and Korea. And actually, about 16% of this trade is in the sector, in the automotive sector. So for me, that's something that is very telling, because basically when we negotiated the FTA, there was the fear from some of our manufacturers, including in Europe, in Germany, that this would work, let's say, to the detriment of the EU manufacturers. And in fact, what we observe now, after almost 10 or 12 years of the implementation of the FTA, is that even though you have on the one hand a very strong, powerful automotive industry, like in the EU, and also in Korea, a powerful automotive industry, still we can exchange. This is a win-win situation. So I really want to emphasize this, that an FTA is a sort of magic wand by which we can have a win-win result for the two partners. Second thing I wanted to mention is that I heard the previous speaker saying and making a pledge for more investments of the EU in Korea. Well, actually, the EU is the #1 investor in Korea. We are the #1 investor, then this is not always very well known. Far ahead of China, US, Japan, whatever. So I wanted to mention this. Now, coming very briefly to the CBAM, it's a new piece of legislation. So the EU is kind of a precursor in this attempt to legislate on carbon leakage, because that's actually what it is about. And you can trust the EU. The EU is not the US. I get your point, because you make the link with the US IRA. And so what I always like to emphasize is that the EU is not the US. We are always very mindful of avoiding any discrimination. Personally, I belong to DigiTrade. That's my home ministry, if you want, in Brussels. And the job of DigiTrade is to make sure that any legislation, any trade-related legislation, is WTO compliant. So I really want to reassure, the audience and everybody in Korea, that this new piece of legislation will not discriminate against Korea or any other actor, and that it's just about addressing carbon leakage. So basically, we have to put on an equal footing, that's the aim of this legislation, the production that is done in the EU with the imports, to make sure that everybody more or less pays the same carbon emissions. So that's all what it is about.
Thank you very much for that reassuring message. I'm sure many Korean automotive companies are very happy to hear that. I do realize we have very limited amount of time left. What I would like to do now is bring you, Mr. Jamie Sell, into the discussion. We heard already that the EU is the largest investor in Korea, and you had some great examples on your presentation. Can you share with us some of the pain points that some of those Danish companies that have already invested in Korea are facing? Or maybe to flip it around, what would be your wish list to improve cooperation between Korea and EU?
I think maybe just laying out a few ground rules first, because basically it can really be quite a daunting experience sitting here as part of the EU and then having EU sitting next to you. But because basically no one really understands the EU completely. I think even for some of the member states, it can be quite a complicated experience. But basically, we are completely in line with the EU Commission, of course. And if you would paint a picture, a spectrum between the member states of the EU, how big, I would say, proponents are you of free trade? Denmark will be very much on the pro-free trade part. Even though changing, I would say, commentators in the US like to call Denmark a socialist country. We are very much far away from that reality. We are die-hard fans of globalization, of free trade, and this is also why I think my message is that let's keep these supply chains competitive and alive, because let's all be realistic here. The world that we've seen developing since 1989, and you have a greater and greater need for cooperation. So those two things are working against each other at the moment. I think to go and answer your question directly, I think, to be honest, my role as head of the trade side from the Danish embassy, that's, if I look at my colleagues around the world, I have an easy job. Doing business in Korea is a fantastic experience. I think the scale, the pace, the welcomeness, the inclusiveness, second to none. You have an industrial capacity here that is nothing but outstanding. And I feel that a lot of the Danish companies that are here, maybe at first they think, okay, Korea is 10,000 kilometers away, different culture, different language, how can we do this? But once they get into the system, they really start growing fast. So I think what I would like to see is the model that we have had, Denmark, EU, Korea. If that could be scaled up and be implemented around the world, I think we start seeing more and more green solutions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mitchell, if I may bring you in for your final thoughts around how do you see any recommendations for improving where we are? I mean, hearing Mr. Sell, it sounds like the relationship between Korea and EU is already really good, but if you may have any suggestions around how to improve it.
Well, I think rather we should think about Jeju's goal to be a green island. EVs are one part of that. But it worries me that next year there will be 10,000 people at this conference, and the carbon footprint of 10,000 people flying to Jeju is enormous. And indeed, the most densely trafficked airline of almost of the world, I believe, is between Seoul and Jeju. We should be looking at safe aviation fuel, SAF, at the same time. And that's the whole context of this whole discussion we've had, that EVs is not the silver bullet. It is part of a process which includes what each one of us does, how we consume, or what we choose to buy, how we reward manufacturers who give us the right product and the greenest product. And I would like to see maybe at next year's conference a discussion of how the EV sits within the overall pattern, and the same debate in Europe as well. And I'd like to get a royal bicycle for our king, who will be crowned next weekend.
So we will be cycling to Jeju next time.
Sailing, maybe. No, I mean, safe aviation fuel. We have to get this right. It's vital for the world. And especially when Europe and Korea are so far apart and made further about by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Safe aviation fuel and biofuel is very important at this time.
Thank you very much. Actually, on aviation also, the EU is leading around setting standards for civil aviation. I'm not sure if Councillor Mr. Besse or Mr. Sell would like to share on that, but EU is setting targets for emission reductions internally, but also internationally. On CORSIA, EU was actually the leading advocate for regulating emissions from aviation. Unfortunately, some other countries, including the US, were not as supportive in that case as well. Mr. Lam, you already shared with us in the morning that EVs are not the silver bullet, as Dr. Mitchell alluded to, but would you like to build on that?
Yeah, I think this morning already, because I've been involved in EV since 2009, and I initially thought, okay, it's a great thing. We have to. I actually said that to my team. If we don't put this technology onto the road, we'll burn in hell. That's because, but then I realized that actually, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to address consumerism, the need for buying new stuff all the time. Most of the EU, most of developed country pushed for consumerism because there's that growth. That's their tax being paid. That's their people got employment and jobs. But we don't realize that actually, the faster we run, the faster we'll run into the wall. And that's the environmental stuff. I know I only woke up, I mean, last time when I did the presentation in Norway, and I was asked to speak about the true meaning of EV, how it impacts. That's why the presentation I did. And I did a lot of research. I did about 6 months research, looking around what's happening. And to my surprise, actually, if we address, as I said in my presentation, even if we adopt 100% EV today, we save 6 to 11% of the global contribution of greenhouse gases. So how about the rest? What are we doing about the rest? It's education, consumerism, cycling, great example. But we don't do that. We don't. We just keep on because there is money to be made. When money is to be made, they will put emphasis on you need this new car. It's better for the environment. Actually, it's not, because it's still use the steel that you're going to do. You're still going to do that. But I'm not asking people to go back to the Stone Age, but I'm saying that it needs balance, right? It needs a whole environment thinking and government thinking behind it, and government motivation and education in terms of education about consumerism. And that's really, really hard to address.
Thank you very much on that powerful social message. Mr. Moshka, if I may, I would like to give you the opportunity for your last words. Any recommendations for EU and Korea?
Thank you, Ali. Taking on the comments that we just have heard, I fully agree on this consumerism, and this applies for both. The more developed, the more rich the country is, the more luxury consumerism it affords, including all the waste and energy spill that is associated to it. No? And this is unfortunately true across Europe, and this is visible in Korea across the regions. I want to quickly come to CBM and then come to the closing comment. While I appreciate that Europe is now doing an intelligent mechanism, and I hope that the free trade is an essential part of it, also Europe drives some other regulations on this one, and there we must not, altogether, we must not fall in the trap of being protectionist, even in the second glance being protectionist, because this would limit the choice for the consumers and ultimately be harmful. And there's a discussion on what Europe is doing in the sake of the environment, the new Euro 7 legislation, putting up much more stringent requirements for old technologies, which diverts investments into previous old-style steam locomotives and ultimately slows down the investment into EVs. And at the end, and you see it already today in Europe, you limit the choice for the consumer because many vehicles are no longer affordable to be put into the market. We at Hyundai also, we need to make our choices. We will not convert all existing ranges for the European consumer as the market no longer sustains this. So these type of trends need to be very carefully managed in order to jointly achieve the goal. And this now allows to come to the final comment, more important on the collaboration, most important on the collaboration after the free trade and the 140 years of Germany and Korea. And I said earlier, we actually both countries, both regions are pretty much in sync. There are small gradual differences, but the electromobility is coming, the manufacturers are coming, suppliers are coming, consumers are adopting it. Now it's important that we continue to work together on the legislation, and we together take the lead for the world in order to protect the export that is the nature of some of the economies, and that we jointly do something good for the environment and create the right standards that hopefully all other big regions, and here's US and China to be named, can follow suit rather than having a competitive and a totally different set of frame that will ultimately limit the free movement of goods and be limiting for the potential of both economies, the Korean and the European economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Dr. Lee, you got the first word and you get the last word. Please share with us your closing remarks.
Thank you very much for your good talks. So about strategic shift, when it comes to Korea, when it comes to ICE, Korea followed a catch-up strategy. But for future vehicles, Hyundai, Kia, and other companies are focusing on market leader strategy. From government point of view, we admit that the speed of EVs are quite later than EU, but recently Korea shifted up its goal to by 2030 the numbers would be up to 3 million cars. And when it comes to hydrogen battery cars, actually the numbers have went down to 880,000 to 300,000, but the will of the Korean government is strong enough. So for the next 7 years, this penetration of EVs will be faster in Korea. And today we have talked about e-mobility, but when it comes to Korean OEMs and global OEMs are working on the software-defined vehicles and connected cars and autonomous driving cars also. We are fully doing these investments and researches, which means that EU and Korea car manufacturing companies can have a better scope of collaboration in the future. So until now, there's been some bad things among the stakeholders, but now we are heading together to 2050 carbon neutral. So Korean and other companies as well needed to be fully prepared until 2030. Only in that way, globally, we can have a sustainable development in the future. So for this 2050 carbon neutral, all stakeholders have to come together, e-mobility and also EV-centered growth. And for this, EU and Korea have to collaborate further in the future. We have to seek better ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, and thank you very much, esteemed panelists. I really appreciate for your insightful comments. If I may summarize, one, we should not forget the role of consumers, which has happened to be the theme throughout today. And the second one, the state of EU and Korea cooperation is already pretty good. Yes, there's room for more improvement, but it's already on a very good, sound footing. Thank you again, and I'll pass it to Dr. Park to close the session for us.
Particular, sorry. And then today, I thank you very much, and then for all of you to join. Today's discussion, panel discussion, was a very valuable and in-depth roadmap for Korea and the EU, and then how to cooperate in the future. In particular, I much appreciate to the Vice President, Alex Mashka, and also the President, Lee Han-gu, and also the panelists. In particular, and then I hope for not stop the talking about this issue today, and we'll further discussion how to collaborate between Korea and the EU. Thank you very much. Thanks. And I would like to announce very shortly, and we are a little bit behind of the schedule, I will go to lunch, and then the 5th floor of this Jeju ICC, and very, very hard to find the road. So if you go with me, and you can go, much easier to access the restaurant. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thanks.
Recording stopped.